Hello, Abnormal Investigations. How's everybody doing? I've got an encounter for you. It's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to, but excuse me. That's a little bit what we're used to around here. All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's jump into this one. Don't forget this Monday coming up. Travis Carpenter is going to be on the show, and he's going to share the DNA studies that they've done, what they mean, and what it could mean for the cryptic world. So it's going to be a really good one, guys. Don't miss it. I know this isn't really the story you're used to hearing on your channel, but I figured I could share this. The title of this story is crazy enough, and most people don't believe me when I tell them. I have a skinwalker friend, but it's worth a shot, right? Hopefully, people can believe as much as what I have to say as they can people that have Bigfoot encounters. I was around 12 years old when this story began. I lived on a huge farm that had about 5 to 10 acres of just woods. I was an only child, and by myself for the most part of my childhood. Ever since my grandfather died, my family has been busy keeping their lives up, leaving me to fall in the background. So I spent my time either on my swing or in the woods. I love the woods. It's always been a safe haven for me. There was this spot I'd always go to. It was a spot in the woods, where a beautiful tree arch presented this sandy small creek. It was small, but it was powerful and deep enough for me to swim in the summer. I always spent my time there since I was alone and had nothing better to do. It was where I would go to feel safe. But the only day that changed, but one day it changed. I was at my spot one afternoon after school just looking for lizards to catch when I heard a very loud thrashing through the thick brush to my right. Looking over, I could see the bushes and leaves shaking, like something big was running through. Something like a bear. I've never seen a bear while I lived, but I've never believed they weren't. But then the bushes stopped shaking, and I heard a sheep bleat. There wasn't any sheep or goats in my neighborhood. None of the neighbors' ranches had sheep or goats, just cows, horses, and the occasional pigs and chickens. I stared confused, before I felt a sudden wave of dread wash over me. I felt as if I was in danger, and every instinct I had screamed out at me to run to my house, but I didn't. I was curious. I crouched behind the tree beside me and watched the bushes, wanting to see if this was an actual sheep. About 5 minutes later, a creature walks out of the bushes. It's tall, lanky, with dirty white fur and long, bony hands. It was skin and bones, and had bright blue eyes that looked human. It looked around, letting out another sheep bleat, but this sound was more distorted, like it had blood in its lungs. I was in shock. Staring at this thing as it limped and hobbled around, headed down toward the creek, I tried to move forward to get a better look. But a twig snapped under my shoe, exposing my position. The creature snapped its head over toward me, instantly, making eye contact with me. I stared, and it stared back. Then it let out a mix of a scream and a sheep bleat, charging toward me. I hightailed it out of there, running through the thick woods with the thing right behind me. Soon, it must have given up, because when I got out of the woods and turned back, it was gone. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I was scared, confused, and intrigued by what I saw. After a few days of research, I came to the conclusion that what I saw was a skinwalker. The thing kept coming back, taking the forms of some of my horses, my dogs, and even mimicking my parents. Sometimes I'd even see the thing watching me from my bedroom window, just staring at me through the trees before retreating to the darkness. It intrigued me. Yet, all the time this was occurring, I was never afraid to go into the woods. And I felt that I had to be cautious, but was never afraid to not go. After a few of the weeks of these occurrences, the thing quieted down, and I never saw it again. I soon forgot about it and started going back to the woods again, doing my original things. After packing a barbecue sandwich, a bag of jerky, and a bottle of water, I set out to my spot in the woods to have a picnic with myself. I did this often, as I like to be outside more than inside. As I was sitting at my spot eating my sandwich, I felt the hair on the back of my neck. You know that feeling. Something was watching me. I turned and saw the same pair of blue eyes staring at me from across the creek. I stared and it stared back. It was submerged in the brush, but I could see enough of it to conclude that it was starving. I could see the bony and shaky arms supporting it as it crouched down to keep itself hidden as much as possible. Feeling sorry for some reason, I stand up and toss my barbecue sandwich across the creek. I watch as it landed in the bushes and the creature turned to attention toward it before disappearing. I stared for a bit longer before turning to walk away and walked to my house, and I heard the rustling of the leaves, and when I turned around and looked, I seen its bony hand with very long fingers reach out, and instead of grabbing the sandwich like we would, it ran 3 of its fingernails right through the top of it, through the bottom, hooked it with its hand, and took off. The next day I went back to retrieve my lunchbox only to see it being ripped up. All the food I had was gone, and containers they were in were destroyed. Huge hoof prints were in the sand, marking the creature as being the culprit for ruining my things. I thought, why did you tear this up? I left this for you. But instead of being mad or disappointed, I felt satisfaction, knowing that at least I helped whatever this was soothe some of the hunger it had. Time skipped to a few weeks, and our farm was hit by a bad storm. It was horrible, small trees being knocked down, our neighbor's pond almost overflowing, and my trampoline going from our backyard to our front yard. Our farm was a mess, but the woods were even worse. I couldn't even walk straight without getting hit by a bent tree or tripping or falling over branches that had fallen. I saw a dead raccoon that was crushed under a fallen branch, and an injured deer limping its way across the woods. I felt concern and fear, feeling bad for all these creatures, but I mainly felt worry that if this thing was hurt. I spent the rest of the day clearing out the path I take to the creek to keep an eye out for the skinwalker, but I never saw it. My worry grew and grew as the days went by, and I could never find it or even trace of it. I was afraid that it had died. Usually, there would be turned up grass, large scratch marks in the trees, or strips of white fur stuck on low branches. But the weird thing was, the fur wasn't its. It was always the fur of deer, I believe deer that it had trapped. It would use the fur, I think, to mark its way. But there was nothing there. After about a week, I was out in the woods doing my usual walk around, and I heard a sharp cry. It sounded like a woman screaming in agony. Kind of like a pig squealing, but a little bit off. I immediately felt the sense of dread, and I knew it was no longer what I was looking for, that it was there. Walking toward the sound, I came over a massive creature struggling. It looked like it was hurt. It was limping. It was clawing the ground frantically, trying to move about. My heart ached for some reason, and I felt this overwhelming urge to help this creature. So trying to stay out of sight, I crept down the thing, looking at the situation. I was doing a pretty good job of getting free, and it was getting free. The legs that was caught, it seemed to be under some branches, so trying my hardest, I attempted to lift a heavy branch to free it. I was far enough away I felt safe, and I could help lift and kind of roll it off of it. I've always been stronger than most kids my age, lifting 2 50-pound horse feed bags with a little struggle, but I was a country boy. I was strong. I had a strong back. It immediately dashed forward, turning around and making eye contact with me. It stared, tilting its head to the side, as if it was intrigued by me. It had taken on the form of a white dog, yet it was too skinny, janky, and unnatural to be one. It was like if a very tall and long-limbed person put a dirty dog skin on and a dog mask and tried to mimic one, doing a bad job at it. But I think it thought that I bought it, that it thought that I had actually maybe freed a dog. And still it was skinny, ribs poking out of its sides, its spine visible as well as its hip bones. I kept eye contact with it, my eyes never leaving it, as I took off my hiking bag and pulled out a small steak I had planned to cook at my special spot. I tossed it over to the creature and it immediately dove for it, eating it in 2 bites. Looking back at me, the thing took a few steps forward. I stood still, my body freezing as I fought between running and staying. There was so much I was seeing that I didn't want to not see, but I wanted to run at the same time. Hard to explain, Mike. The creature continued to walk toward me before coming to a stop only a mere feet from me. It smelled of rotten flesh and horrible body odor, and I resisted the urge to vomit. It was that bad. I met those unnatural blue eyes, having to crank my neck back. This thing was 8 to 10 feet tall, so looking up at it was a bit of a challenge for the shorter me. We stared at each other for a good minute before the thing just turned and limped away, disappearing into the woods. Ever since then, I've seen it almost every day when I would make my fire at my spot. I would be across the creek listening to my music, sometimes on my phone, and I would see it across the creek doing its thing. I always said it was spying on me. When I would be outside with my horses, it would watch me from the woods as if making sure I was all right, or maybe studying me, I'm not sure. When I was hanging out with my friends in my room, I would see it wandering around my pastures outside, occasionally looking at me with those unnatural blue eyes, peeking around the barn or from inside of the barn. I would tell it about my life sometimes, just sitting out in the dark. I would tell it everything about me, and it would sit and listen, but always being hidden, always hiding. I never knew what form it would come in, but it was always in the same place, and it always sit and listen until I left. I would take it the leftovers from my family's dinner, and I would always save them for the creature and leave it for him. We moved 3 times that summer, always living by the woods, but not the same woods, and it would always follow. Until I became an adult, attending church was always something very important to me and my family. I became saved on a Sunday and was baptized, and after that happened, I never seen the creature again. No matter how hard I tried or what I left or how much I looked, it was never there, as if it had vanished. I hope my story makes people think about the things they see in the woods, that it may not always be as they appear. Thank you for sharing my story. Wow. Well, believing that these things are evil, I believe that whenever you got saved, it could no longer communicate with you. It didn't have that authority. So when that happened, it saw the light of God on you and it couldn't be there. That's just my opinion. What do you all think happened? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to answering your all's comments, even just communicating with you all. Thank you so very much, and until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner, and we'll see you on the next one.